we have even more evidence that Chris Grier actually had a good offseason for the Miami Dolphins. I thought they have done a pretty solid job for the hand that they created for themselves. Now, you can blame them for giving themselves a limited hand, but with what they had to work with, I believe they've done an excellent job. And ESPN actually applauded the Dolphins offseason as well. And I want to look back at what Miami has done, what ESPN had to say about this Fins offseason, and give my grade for it at the end of today's show. But when you think about what has transpired this offseason and summer so far for the Dolphins, it was a very slow-moving free agency. There wasn't a lot of big signings. The biggest one that happened was James Daniels to that 3-year, $24 million contract. But other than that, it was pretty much underwhelming. But I love what Miami did in the NFL draft, investing into the trenches, and I'll be honest, I like what they did in the Jalen Ramsey trade because he was a foregone conclusion off of the roster. So to be able to get a 5th-round pick in Minkah Fitzpatrick in return, I think that's a pretty solid job for Miami. And hopefully they are not done and will add one more secondary member before Dolphins training camp gets underway. And when the Dolphins potentially make another move, we will have you covered. Make sure you are subscribed because there is a move coming, hopefully at corner, whether it's Asante Samuel Jr. or Rasul Douglas. And when that signing happens, we'll make a video. So make sure you subscribe and join us here at Dolphins Today. So the official grade that ESPN gave the Miami Dolphins offseason was a B-, which I think is right in the middle. Nothing over the top, nothing that is considered garbage, just right in the middle. And that's fine by me. I'll give you my grade at the end, like I mentioned. But there were some superlatives that ESPN gave out to the Dolphins offseason. The biggest move, that one is a no-brainer. It's obviously trading Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey to the Steelers for Minkah Fitzpatrick. But that was also the favorite move that ESPN had, was acquiring Minkah Fitzpatrick in return for Jalen Ramsey. The one signing that they absolutely hated and was their least favorite was signing Zach Wilson. And if I'll be honest, if the worst move and least favorite signing or transaction Miami had this offseason was ultimately signing a backup quarterback, I think you're doing something right. If that's the biggest thing you can nitpick about an offseason is a backup QB in free agency to a 1-year deal, that means you did a good job, in my opinion. Well, let's kick it over to what Seth Walder of ESPN had to say, specifically on the Jalen Ramsey trade. Walder said that Ramsey backed the Dolphins into a corner with more than $20 million remaining in guaranteed 2025 money, and the Dolphins weren't even pretending he was going to be on the team this season. I thought Miami would barely get any return, in which the acquiring team paid the large bulk of Ramsey's outstanding money. The Dolphins did better than I thought. And that's what I've been trying to say. I know a lot of people are upset about Jonnu Smith being traded. I did not want to trade Jonnu Smith. I was very open about that. You can go back and watch some of the content we put out. I wanted to try to figure a way out to keep Jonnu in Miami for the 2025 season without extending him to a huge contract, which, by the way, Pittsburgh giving him a 1-year, $12 million extension, that is a large deal. I know it's only 1 year, but $12 million is a lot. So when you revisit the full trade details, I view this in 2 separate trades. And this is how I do it, right? So Ramsey, with the backed-in corner that he gave Miami in that salary, Miami, in my opinion, essentially traded Jalen Ramsey to the Steelers for a 2027 5th-round pick. That is how that ultimately came to fruition. That is what happened. So a early-ish day 3 pick for Ramsey. The Steelers also pay the majority of Ramsey's contract. That's a win. And then the second separate deal in this own trade is Jonnu Smith and a 7th for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And here is my viewpoint. If you separated the 2 trades, one happened in March, one happened in June, I think everyone would say, all right, that's a good trade each time for Miami. But because they're combined and it's Ramsey and Jonnu leaving Miami, and you only get 1 draft pick in Minkah, that's where I think people tend to believe the Dolphins didn't really do that well in this trade. But if you view it in 2 separate deals, well then, to me, it's oh, Miami actually did a really good job here. And I will continue to say that. With Ramsey already being off the roster in everybody's mind, they weren't going to get too much back So getting a early-ish day 3 pick and a top 10 safety in the National Football League, I think that was an unbelievable win for Chris Grier. Your turn. ESPN gave Miami a B- for this offseason. I want to know your grade for Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel, and this organization. A, B, C, D, or F. Don't have to give me a solid letter either. It could be an A+, an A-, a B+, a B-. Make sure you include that as well. But if it's a solid letter grade, hey, that's what you guys give it. So grade it down in the comment section below. It is today's pinned comment. My grade is coming at the end of the show, so be sure to be tuned in for that. And when I give my grade, you'll see what it is. But there's a lot to still break down that happened in this offseason for Miami, and specifically what Chris Grier was maybe applauded for or not happy about. Let's go to free agency now. Seth Walder said that Miami's next largest free agency acquisition was guard James Daniels on a 3-year deal averaging $8 million per season. I thought it was a nice signing. Daniels suffered an Achilles injury last September, but ranked 25th in pass block win rate at guard and 35th in run block win rate in 2023. I think James Daniels is going to be an absolute massive addition for Miami. So you see it there. He ranked top 40 in pass block win rate and run block win rate for the Steelers in 2023. Well, that's a top 20 guard in the National Football League without a question. And then if you look back at what he was doing in the first month of the season last year for the Steelers before he suffered that Achilles injury, he was graded out as a top 5 offensive guard in the National Football League. So in the last, let's just say, 18, 20 games we've seen James Daniels play, he's been a top 20 guard in the entire NFL. That is going to be a massive addition for Miami, and I can't wait to see him in that aqua and orange on Sundays. He's going to slot into either left guard or right guard. I will continue to say I think he should be your left guard, so he gives some stability next to the first-time full-year starter in Patrick Paul, and then you could play the rookie Savvy Anaya in between two veterans, Aaron Brewer and Austin Jackson. But he is just going to provide such a nice veteran, calming presence, and having him work hand-in-hand with Aaron Brewer, who was a top 10 center in the National Football League a year ago, is going to be so nice to see an improved interior offensive line. Because as we know, Miami's offensive line, specifically on the interior last season, was abysmal with Robert Jones, Liam Eichenberg surrounding Aaron Brewer. This is a revamped front 5 that is hoping to get back towards the 2023 type of O-line, where Miami had a top 5 rushing attack in the NFL, with Raheem Mostert having 17 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards, Devon Achane contributing with 800 yards himself. Like, this is a team that is hopefully getting back to that more well-balanced offensive attack, and it all starts with being better in the trenches. They made a very massive effort this offseason to revamp the offensive line with Daniels and Savvy Anaya, as well as the defensive line by drafting 3 interior D linemen, Kenneth Grant, Jordan Phillips, and Zeke Biggers. All right, so we talked about the positive moves. Let's briefly talk about Zach Wilson now, because remember, he was labeled as the worst signing and worst move by ESPN. And the reason why they labeled Wilson as that bad signing is because of the contract he got. Remember, Miami gave him a 1-year, $6 million deal that can get up to $10 million, so a lot of incentives. You hope that those incentives don't get reached, because that means Tua Tagovailoa stayed healthy for the majority of the season. But the reason why it was knocked by Walder is because Wilson's contract ultimately is earning him more than Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, and Drew Lock, who are seen as potentially better backups or equal backups. But it was just paid a little bit more than Zach Wilson. But I was very positive about the Zach Wilson signing when it happened in early March, and I'm going to continue to echo that sentiment. Although it's been a up and down OTAs and minicamp so far for Wilson, I am excited to watch him in training camp and in the preseason, and I'm just simply not going to complain about the signing. I'm not, because what have we done over the last 3 seasons as people who cover this football team and as fans? We have complained about the backup quarterback situation, whether it being Skylar Thompson, Tim Boyle, Tyler Huntley. By the way, Huntley still unsigned, if I am not mistaken. Like, the Dolphins have had non-NFL quarterbacks, QBs that should not be in the National Football League, backing up and replacing Tua Tagovailoa when he's missed games. Like, they finally have one with legit talent. So you want me to complain about that? Okay, Miami gave him maybe $1 million more guaranteed than they should have. Whoop-de-doo. You want me to really get up in arms for that? I am not going to do it. And this is not me getting on Seth Walder from ESPN. Like, I think he also understands that Miami need to overpay maybe slightly for a backup quarterback with the talent that Zach Wilson has. And he was viewed as a good locker room guy for Denver, being the backup to Bo Nix a year ago. And I think he's just nitpicking at this point. But, like, you will not see me complain about having Zach Wilson be the backup, considering the 3 quarterbacks we've had to see sub in for Tua over the last 3 or 4 seasons. Just not going to complain. But let me know, what was the worst move the Dolphins made this offseason? I'm going to give you mine here in a second as well. So let me know. It could have been a player that the Dolphins signed you didn't like, drafted you didn't like, a trade back in the draft, the trade with Jalen Ramsey, or not re-signing a player. What was the worst move the Dolphins made this offseason? My worst was not re-signing Kus Campbell. And maybe this is a cop-out because it's a move that did not happen. But I just simply believe this was the biggest mistake Miami made all offseason long. And I was very upfront about that. I was pounding my fist on the table before free agency opened. Re-sign Kus Campbell to a 1-year deal. Re-sign Kus Campbell. And then free agency dragged on. He continued to be unsigned. And I was like, re-sign Kus Campbell. And then ultimately he went to the Arizona Cardinals on a 1-year deal. Miami offered him a contract that was similar price to what Arizona offered him, but Calais wanted to go compete in Arizona, somewhere he started his NFL career. So, I mean, I can't fault Miami to a massive degree, considering that they offered him a deal. It's not like they didn't want to bring him back, but I would have loved to bring back the veteran who just was awesome for Miami last season. And then if you brought him back, he would have been able to mentor the young players on the D-line you have right now, and Kenneth Grant, Zeke Biggers, and Jordan Phillips. Not saying that Zach Sealer won't do that to a fine level, but Campbell is just one of the best interior D linemen that the NFL has seen over the last decade, so it would have been even nice to have both of them be able to teach the young guys as well as contribute. But before we round out today's show, my offseason grade for Miami. I'm going with a B, so I am going slightly higher than ESPN, but just by a half a letter grade, if you will. They gave us a B-. I give it a B. I think you can't complain about what Miami's done this offseason, like I mentioned, with their lack of cap space and lack of insane draft capital, if you will. And when you look at what has happened to this Dolphins roster, I think there are 3 main improvements, 3 main declining spots on this roster. The improvements is at safety, offensive line, and linebacker, with the declining portions being cornerback without a hesitation, tight end losing Jonnu Smith, and interior D-line. I do like the 3 draft picks Miami made, but losing Calais Campbell, Deshaun Hand, and only replacing them with basically a pair of rookies is a little bit sketchy, if you will. But you think about the safety room, man. Like, you add Minkah Fitzpatrick, you say you replace Javon Holland with Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's a clear upgrade. Jordan Poyer, gone. I think Iafatu Melifonwu and Ashtyn Davis in the aggregate will be infinitely way better than Jordan Poyer. I would argue one of Davis or Melifonwu would be better. So you add both of them. And then you still have McMorris, Elijah Campbell, Dante Trader Jr. competing for depth on this roster. Like, this safety room is way better. We already touched on how the offensive line should be improved after moving on from Liam Eichenberg and Robert Jones at left guard. So, like, to me, I love what the Dolphins have done with this offseason, considering they did not have a ton of assets and ability to improve in a massive way. And assuming another cornerback is signed, whether it is an Asante Samuel Jr., Rasul Douglas, or Stephon Gilmore, Mike Hilton, whoever it may be, assuming Miami adds a veteran corner to help out that boundary room of Cam Smith and Storm Duck, and Tua stays healthy, I know it's a big if, this team should be solid in 2025. You have a relatively easy schedule in the first 8 weeks of the year, where I think Miami should be either 5-3 or 6-2 if Tua is healthy. I really believe that. And as long as you don't completely fall off a cliff like you have done in a couple of the past years, well, then you should be able to compete for a wild card spot. Division, I don't know. I think the Bills are probably going to run away with it again. But wild card spot is absolutely in play for this Dolphins football team as long as they have their QB1 stay healthy, get off to the start they should, and then don't just absolutely nosedive off a cliff. And if that ultimately happens this year, where they nosedive off a cliff, well, then that man you just saw on screen, Mike McDaniel, probably will not be coaching this football team in 2026. That'll do it for today's show. Like I mentioned off the top, if the Dolphins and when the Dolphins sign another corner, we will have a video for you on that. So make sure you subscribe and join the family here at Dolphins Today. As always, go Fins.